It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome back to another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. Don't be alarmed. I'm back. No shiesty mask today. Back with just a hat. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders, as always. And because it's a Friday before a game, Derrick Bell joining the show. Steelers DB, how we doing?
Doing all right, man. Can't complain. It's crazy that to me that we're already in the regular season finale. It feels like this year kind of flew by. It always feels like that. But yeah, we have an interesting game with some pretty big playoff implications. I mean, the Steelers are in. We don't know about the Bengals yet. Seems like they have they need a prayer. But there's a lot of seeding implications to go along with this one. So a lot to talk about.
Loved seeing that list from the Chiefs come out today about who wasn't playing for them in that game against the
but
Broncos.
no Tua.
Yeah,
it's not going to be the. I mean, I assume it's not going to be the Dolphins to knock them out. It's going to have to be Denver.
He's done. They need Carson Wentz. Their season is riding on Carson.
I mean,
Wentz
the Steelers can just knock them out on Saturday and make it a non-issue. I think. I think that should be the focus.
It should absolutely be the focus. But
I mean,
Alan, how are you doing?
Isn't this game weird? Like that, it kind of means a lot for the Steelers, but only because they've lost 3 games in a row, and not like because the result of the game matters that much. Like in all probability, Baltimore's going to win, and like the difference between the 5 seed and the 6 seed is really not that big of a deal. It's just about not going in the playoffs feeling like crap, losing 4 games in a row. But also, I think the thing that nobody's talking about is getting to knock your divisional rival out and end their season is kind of cool. Like that's something worth doing, even if the game doesn't mean anything else to you in general.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yep.
I actually I agree with Alan. Like, this is a big game to me for some of the reasons that Alan said about like just not wanting to go into the playoffs, like loses the 4th straight. I think that's obviously a bad omen. But I kind of disagree, man. I think that the difference between getting the 5 seed and getting the 6 seed is monumental, massive. Like, I don't think I could overstate it enough. Okay. Like, my confidence level with this team going up against like the Texans on the road and going into Baltimore again is completely different. Not to say that they wouldn't have a chance to beat the Ravens again in the grudge match. I just don't think the Texans are a very good team, man. I've said that over and over again. I think the Steelers match up pretty well with them. So for me personally, I think it's a huge game that they win this one and are finding a way to get that 5 seed. But yeah, like you said, I also think that is a cool thing of being able to knock your divisional opponent, divisional rival, like out of the playoffs. Like it was funny. I saw the video of like that San Antonio Holmes walk-off. I think it was 2006 in Cowher's last game. I was actually in the stadium as a kid watching San Antonio walk that off, and the Steelers had nothing to play for on that day. I think the Bengals did, if I remember correctly. I think they had a playoff shot on the line in that one. So, but yeah, I think, anytime like AFC North football, I think it means a little bit more, especially when there are playoff implications in this one.
Can I provide maybe an alternate perspective? This isn't what I'm saying I want to have happen, but I would be lying if I said the thought didn't creep into my mind. Because they are a division rival, I do not want the Bengals in the playoffs. However, just because it's like, if you just take that roster, that specific team, and the amount of damage I think they could potentially do if they got in, like they provide the best chance of a 7 seed beating Buffalo, in my opinion, as the 2 seed. So like, I'd be lying if I didn't think about the idea of them getting into the playoffs to maybe create some havoc where at some point the Steelers could down the line host a playoff game.
I think if you knew the Chargers were going to lose, I think it might be a little tempting for the Steelers to just take their foot off the gas. Like, but they don't. They have to play ahead, and yeah, I mean, that's why I just don't think the stakes are that big. Because I think there's some advantages to different ways playing out. I do think not only would the Bengals go in 7 seed help maybe beat the Bills, but also give the Steelers a better chance of like maybe playing a home game down the road as a 3 or a 5 seed. So I don't know. They can't be a 3 seed and get the Bengals in. I don't think that works. But I don't know if I'm as confident going into Houston as DB is, just because like 30-6 last year, probably like. Yeah. I agree. Like this year's Texans team is not playing very well, but they did like really carve them up last year.
I think that there is some differences with the team, but the one thing that like is similar is like the offensive line's been bad all year. They were playing backups and third stringers against the Steelers last year with that offensive line. Like Bobby
Mhm.
Slowick and CJ Stroud had a great game plan for getting the ball out of his hands quick and absolutely gashing the Steelers. That was the first game where I feel like it really became prevalent that the Steelers just didn't have the athletes on the back end. I mean, we kind of thought that going into the season last year, but like watching those guys try to cover sideline to sideline and the amount of yak Houston got in that game, that's to me where it really became prevalent.
Yep. Yeah, I mean that matchup last year was obviously a bloodbath for sure. I have just been so wholly unimpressed with this Houston team. I think they're kind of in the same spot as like I feel like a lot of the Steelers teams in years past, where they've kind of just I don't want to say like got in by default, but just kind of
Mhm.
barely sneaking in. But you kind of know that they're not really dangerous like whatsoever. And I think Stroud's a really talented player, and someone who I think is going to be even better in the long run than I thought he would be pre-draft. But if you look at like all of his numbers, like his numbers are like pale in comparison to even what they were last year. I think a lot of what last year's success was him bailing the Texans out of like really bad down and distance situations, and he hasn't been able to do that this year. He's not nearly as accurate this year as he was last year, in my opinion. I think it's just the situation around him has kind of eroded him. And I look at the Steelers. You talk about a team with offensive line issues sorting things out in pass protection. I mean, that's a pretty
Mhm.
good formula for the Steelers. And like you mentioned, Zach, like we saw Nico Collins go ham last year, and like that obviously is a problem. But no Tank Dell, no Stephon Diggs, so it's like you can still. I don't want to say that they're going to be able to shut Nico down one-on-one with Joey Porter Jr., but you can kind of focus your pass game plan around that one player. So it'd be
Mhm.
interesting. I mean, the big thing though, like in order for that to even transpire, they've got to win tomorrow night.
Right.
That's the
I
most
almost felt
important
like we
thing.
were starting to do a Texans preview here. We might have to save that for hopefully. Well, I guess
Hopefully
best
next
case
week.
scenarios. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully, best case scenario, we're the 3 seed, but maybe
Right.
potentially talking about this exact thing that we're starting to talk about. So let's save that conversation. Let's talk about the Bengals. Alan and I talked yesterday about the injury reports from both sides. There's a name that's not going to play in this game, though, and it has nothing to do with an injury. Jermaine Burton not traveling with the team, will not play in this game. He hasn't played a whole ton this year. He's been a contributor in special teams as their kickoff return guy and stuff like that. He's made some impact. I actually remember some nice kick returns that he had against the Steelers in that game, kind of flipping field position. So, what do we make of this? Not only in the short term, but also long term. You got Tee Higgins, maybe potentially we thought on his way out. Andre Yoshivas is a nice piece. Is he enough to be the 2? And can you trust Jermaine Burton to step into a bigger role? Like, where are we at with this and what it means?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of had the same notes you did about Burton. Just like he's been a really good kick returner. He's only got like a little over a dozen, I think, returns, but he's been averaging like 30 yards a clip. And then like you go look at where the Steelers rank in like kick return yardage, and they're dead last by a wide margin. So yeah, I mean, I do think that is something that when the margins are tight, this is a 2-point game for the spread. Like special teams matters even more. So the later you get into the season, but in terms of the Higgins thing, it's going to be really interesting to see what Cincinnati's going to do with him. Obviously, he just signed with Jamar Chase's agent. I am very excited about the possibility of him no longer playing in the AFC North, unless it's with
Same.
Pittsburgh. Like, that's cool. But I hope that this is the last time that they've got to go up against like the Burrow, Higgins, Chase kind of trio. And I think the reason for that is pretty obvious. Like, you just watch them. If you're like a film guy or somebody just who likes watching X's and O's, like Cincinnati's offense is like not going to be for you. Like it's just not. They run like 9 plays. It's the most generic like Madden type game plan of all time. It's just they have absolute dudes at really important positions. So in order to keep that offensive philosophy, I would say that you probably need a really good number 2 wide receiver. I think Higgins is probably the epitome of that, if not like a low end number 1, something like that. But we'll see what they do. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that the Steelers, if he does reach the open market, I'm sure they'll be interested in him. But I think a lot of teams are going to be willing to throw a lot of cash at Tee Higgins this offseason.
Yeah, I think the Steelers should be kind of exhaling about Jermaine Burton kind of being unable to keep his stuff together, because I think one way or the other, this is really going to hurt Cincinnati. I think when you looked at their big picture coming into this year with Chase, on his extension and Higgins playing under the franchise tag, like you knew they were going to be spending some money here at the position, but it really felt like Burton was like an attempt for them to say, okay, maybe we can replace one of these guys. Because he does have that potential. Like he's an elite athlete and has been a really productive receiver when he's been able to kind of keep himself, engaged in the sport. Obviously, that's been a big struggle for him this year. This will be the second time that he's not playing in a game because of, I mean, I don't know what he did or was said or whatever, why Zach Taylor decided not to send him to Pittsburgh, but this will be the second time he was benched for missing a walkthrough earlier in the year. This is a guy who had the potential to be every bit as good as these other two guys that Cincinnati has, and him not panning out is a big blow to Cincinnati. Like, they're going to have to, like you said, like, they're going to have to pay Higgins a ton of money to keep him, or if that does, they're going to have to go pay somebody else, and there's not a whole lot of somebody else's out there. So, like, this is kind of one of those situations where I know the Steelers are going to be involved in the wide receiver market, and obviously I do think they're going to at least make an attempt with Tee Higgins, but, man, like, Cincinnati's going to have to open up the wallet here, and that's a direct result of them. So, I mean, I think it's too late to write a guy off entirely, but it doesn't look like they're going to be able to count on Jermaine Burton in 2025.
We talked about historical trends a lot, and when you look at that ownership group, Mike Brown, owner over there, like, historically has not, paid up. I know that they obviously gave Joe Burrow the contract extension that he did. Fully expect Jamar Chase to get his money as well. But then you get to, like, okay, paying a second receiver. Like, so does that, because of knowing who the owner is there and the way that they've done things, does that make it more or less likely to you that this happens?
I mean, it's like the cash spending thing. Like, is he going to be willing to pay out? Because you got to think about, like, what Chase is going to command. Like, he's probably going to top Justin Jefferson's contract. You got to think about the signing bonus aspect of that, and then, like, whatever he's going to make next year. He's scheduled, I think, base salary wise to make about $20 million or $22 million, something like that. So you got to think you're probably paying him $60 million at least in cash probably this offseason. And then, like, you think about the options with Tee Higgins. If you franchise tag him, it's 120% of, like, his base salary, right? So that's gonna be like 26 more million. So then you're up to, like, you're spending $85 million in cash on two wide receivers, one of which isn't even signed long term. He's just like a short term band-aid. So, and then, like, that number obviously goes up a lot more if Higgins, like, takes a long term deal there, because you're talking about a signing bonus there and, like, the base salary and things like that. So it's, to me, like, you look at Cincinnati's cap space, it seems like it's just obvious, right? Like, you have a ton of cap. You don't have very many good players. Like, your roster is super, super top heavy. You've got three of the best players in the sport on the opposite side of the ball. Like, let's keep that trio together. The issue that Cincinnati's ran into, not to belabor the point, but, like, the issue that they've kind of ran into is, like, they just haven't drafted well. And, like, that really hurts your team. Like, they've tried to do the, hey, we'll pay money on, in certain groups or whatever, and we'll supplement that with draft picks. Like, none of their draft picks have panned out. And, like, that's kind of where you get into the situation where it's like, you almost feel like you won't, regardless if you want to pay two receivers or not, they may just have to, because they don't have any other players that, like, really need to be paid, to be honest with you. They spent a bunch of money on that defensive line this past offseason. It's terrible. So, yeah.
Yeah, they may have to come up with some way to, like guarantee a massive percentage of, like, Chase's contract so that they can not have to pay so much of it up front. You know what I mean? Like, like, guarantee 4 years of it or something like that, so that they can push some of the cash money into the future and not be all up front. Otherwise, I don't know how they make this work. They can also tag Higgins again and then try to trade him, right? Like, they can do that. Yeah. I mean, that's a nightmare scenario for the Steelers, because obviously they're not going to trade him here.
Yeah, I was that entered my mind as well. Tagging, whether it be for him to play on the tag or a tag and trade scenario where, then he is going somewhere else that wouldn't be Pittsburgh, and also the Bengals getting a draft pick to do very poorly with, as Derek just highlighted. So I don't know, but we'll see how that shakes out. Anything else to add on that? No.
That's
okay.
pretty much all I got.
We're talking about non-Steelers. Let's switch to the Steelers real quick. And then, of course, this is a Friday, so we'll get into predictions and stuff here in a second. But, Alan, you mentioned something that I thought was interesting. Talked a lot about, is this potentially Tee Higgins' last game in this matchup? What about guys on the Steelers side? Steelers' last home regular season game here. We don't know if they're going to have a home game in the playoffs as of yet. Right now, outside shot to do so. But there's a lot of guys on this roster that could be playing their last game at Acrisure Stadium as Pittsburgh Steelers. Whether it's Najee Harris, we've talked a lot about him, right? Russ is only on a 1-year deal. Dan Moore Jr. could very well get paid by another team with the Steelers tackle situation. I would like to think not, but a guy like a Landon Roberts as well on his, in the last year of his deal. So, what do we make of this group of players, and just like the fact that, this could be their last game at Acrisure Stadium?
Yeah, there's a big group there. I mean, I think some of these guys, the writing has been on the wall, right? Like Dan Moore. I mean, you draft 2 tackles in the first round, back-to-back years. You know that's not happening. Najee with the option, and what comparable running backs have been getting paid so much more than the option years that the Steelers declined. Like, it's hard to fathom those 2 guys coming back. Question. The ones I wonder about, the one I really wonder about is Donte Jackson, because when he's been healthy, he's played pretty well. He's got a lot of interceptions, but he's also like a limited guy in terms of what you can do with him scheme wise. Like, he's really fast, and they certainly have needed his speed, but he can't do like everything as like a number 1 corner, or even, and so and he's been hurt a lot. And so I don't know what they're going to do there. Like, they have pretty big needs, assuming Harris doesn't come back at running back. Well, we talked about wide receiver. They got to figure out something at quarterback, and then kind of the future of the defensive tackle position. Do they want to add needing a starting cornerback to that group if they don't bring Donte Jackson back? I don't know. That to me is the one that's real questionable. E-Rob, I mean, he's basically said he's coming back. I don't know. I mean, I don't think they have a deal or anything, but it seems like he's pretty confident that's happening. He's pretty motivated to make it happen. So my guess is it's going to.
Yeah, Derek, I mean, you can kind of, whichever players within that group. I guess Donte Jackson we'll start with first, because Alan mentioned that one. What is your take on Donte Jackson? I think that's interesting because, like Alan said, he's got the ball production this year with 5 interceptions, but I think it's very clear, like he's kind of the different guy within that group, right? Like, we saw the Steelers start to attack in the draft, wanting to get these bigger, longer, like traitsy guys, and Donte's kind of the antithesis of that, like complete opposite. So what's your take on Donte Jackson?
I would love to be like in the room with the Steelers in terms of like where they discuss like, okay, what are the traits or what are the things that we like our corners to be able to do? Because if you look at the roster, you would never be able to figure that out, to be honest with you. Just because they just, and like, I think there is some value in like having different like archetypes of players for sure. In terms of Jackson, like I think the ball production and the film are really 2 different stories. I think you look at the film, and there's been a lot of times where like there's a lot of yards being left on the field, and like with what Alan was saying is like he is like somewhat limited in terms of like some of the things that you can do with him, because he's not a good tackler. So like that's one of the things. He's not really like, because of like him being 5'10", 180 pounds, there are certain matchups that are going to be difficult on him, especially like when it gets into press coverage. Like he can get moved off his spot pretty easily. I do think the speed element makes him a better player than some of the other, like, I always kind of joke that the Steelers always have like 1 or 2 like 78 overall cornerbacks on the outside. Like that's just like what they've done for the majority of my lifetime. They sometimes will have like one number 1 corner, and then they'll have another guy out there who's just kind of like, I don't want to say like an NPC, but he's just, there. And I think that Jackson is basically that level or caliber of player to me, but he's fast. And I think his speed has been better than I think like having a guy like Levi Wallace out there, having Patrick Peterson out there, because then it's just like one of the things where I felt like you have to do a lot more in terms of protecting him. But I mean, we saw him he got ran by last week by Justin Watson. I think the health thing is a big issue for me, because it's not like he's missed a ton of games. It's just like he doesn't play 100% of snaps most games. Like he's in and out of the game all the time. And I think that even in a game like this, and like, I don't want to make this a bigger deal than it needs to be, but like he's questionable, right, with the back injury. So you have to make a decision on like, okay, James Pierre is like has been our top backup for most of the season. He's also a key special teams guy. Do we give Corey Trice a helmet or not? So like it makes those types of decisions really difficult, because like you don't know if he's going to be able to make it through each and every game, because it always seems like a wild card. So I would say if it were me, I would, like in a perfect world, I think Jackson's someone you upgrade over. But like Alan said, there are other needs on the roster to where if they gave him like a cheap salary or something like that to come back and play, and like you double dip at corner in the draft and see if somebody can take over for him midseason, then sure. I have like no interest in like paying what maybe some other team may pay after they see like 5 interceptions in the box score. But I think it just depends on cost for me.
Yeah, it's not like the world's best free agent corner class either. Like I think that probably should play into it a little bit.
And he's almost 30.
Yeah. So like I don't know. I think it's I think that one's a tough choice. I think I would feel much better about going into the draft or free agency needing a corner if they decide to re-sign Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, and quarterback is just kind of taken care of. Like, I'm not necessarily expecting that to happen. I do think the Steelers at some level would like both of those guys back. I'm not quite sure where they are numbers wise with both of where those players are kind of in their heads, or if Justin would even be willing to come back again if he's not, in line for a bigger role. But like, if you take quarterback off the table, whether it's your own guys or you go out and make a trade early in the offseason or something like that, like, let's say the Falcons cut Kirk Cousins 2 days after the Super Bowl, you could sign him on February 15th, like something like that. Like, if a quarterback is taken care of earlier, I think you could gain a little confidence in deciding that it's possible to make an upgraded corner later.
Let me ask y'all a question real quick. And I don't want to put this like really bad, like worst case scenario outcome into the universe. But just as a hypothetical thing, because the Steelers are 2-point underdogs in this game against the Bengals, right? They're home underdogs. If we assume, let's just say that they do lose this week, they're going to be pretty heavy underdogs going into Baltimore. I would assume wildcard weekend as well. Let's just assume, like, I think Russ will be back as of right now, if I had to guess, or if I was a betting man. What happens if the Steelers lose out and they finish the season on a 5-game losing streak? We know there's not going to be coaching changes in terms of like Tomlin would be back. Like, we know that that's not in play here, but like, do you think that changes their philosophy with like Russ?
I do.
Or should it?
I think it should, and I think it would. Yeah. I mean, I think Russ has been, on the whole, probably a little better than I expected him to be. But you can't, like, I think especially because of his age too, like, it gives the impression that like he like wore down over the course of a year, and like and he didn't even play the whole year, right? Like, I just I don't think he can play 2 more bad games and then come back as like the starter, like, for sure. I just don't see how that can happen.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. DB saying they lose the game, but are we just assuming that like these 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, they could lose the Bengals 50-48.
Yeah. So what if Russ plays well within the
Russ necessarily?
Let's just say, because I do think, I mean, Russ torched this Bengals defense just a couple of weeks ago. Like, this is not like and the Bengals defensive numbers, if you look at them over the last month, they're better, but like, look at the quarterbacks they're playing. Like, this is not a good defense. This is a really bad defense, 100%. I do think Russ will play well tomorrow. I think that that's definitely within the cards. Let's just say, I guess in my hypothetical scenario, like, they lose a shootout tomorrow night, like Russ plays fine. Maybe he has another turnover or two, but like, let's just say he's not the reason they lose on Saturday. But then in the wild card round, like, let's just say they go to Baltimore and like they get into one of those similar games that they had a couple weeks ago where it's very clear. I mean, we know there's a difference in quarterback there, but I'm just saying like that the Steelers aren't close to where Baltimore is, and they do lose out of the season. Would that make you change, or do you think the Steelers would change course with Russ as like the guy next year?
I do. Yeah. I think in that scenario, yeah.
I mean, I would say no. Whether I would or not, I don't think they would. I think they stay the course, which is what I felt like was going to happen with Russ.
Yeah.
And I'll add, I think if they do change the course with Russ, I think Fields is the most likely second option. Like, I know I mentioned Kirk Cousins, but like,
can we get Shane Steichen in here then once he's fired by Indy?
I don't know how realistic that is. Like, I just think if
just don't let Shane talk to the press. God, what a disaster he's been.
Why was Justin late this week? Hey, not everybody shows up on time sometimes.
Yeah. Why's Justin not practicing? Oh, he's sore. Talk to Justin. He's got 3 cracked ribs.
Yeah, not great from that perspective, but yeah, I like the pairing with Shane Steichen and Justin Fields, but it's not going to happen.
But anyways, like any pairing that involves their defense never having to play against Shane Steichen again.
Honestly, that was my original post.
Hire him so somebody else doesn't.
Yeah. Yep, that was my original tweet, and then somebody was like, "Yeah, he'd be a great pairing with Justin Fields." I was like, "You know what? You're right. Yeah, that for that reason too." But anyways, all right, let's talk about this game specifically against the Bengals. We'll start with DB. Obviously, again, this is a divisional game, so this is the second time that we've seen them. But maybe some things have changed. I don't know. When you look at this Bengals offense going against the Steelers defense, Joey Porter Jr. coming back obviously did not have probably the best taste in his mouth at this last matchup, the way that things went for him with all the flags. How do you feel like this matchup's going to go from that perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think has a good chance at potentially deciding the game. like that final score of this game. I mean, we saw what Tee Higgins did to Riley Moss last week, right? Like Riley Moss, who has had
I thought he was going to retire.
Yeah, he has had a good season. Like I promise people that don't watch like a lot of Broncos stuff, they're probably thinking like there's a white cornerback on my screen and he's getting obliterated. Like this is why white people don't play corner in the league anymore. But I promise like Riley Moss has been good this season. It's just Tee Higgins was just better. Like he was just dunking on him over and over again. It was nightmare type stuff. So we see like the type of like game-changing type talent that T can be. And I think that Joey, like obviously with the first matchup, I think he was called for something like he was called for 6 penalties in that game.
Flagged. I think it was like 4 accepted. But
yeah, 4 accepted penalties. Yeah, I mean, it's going to decide. I think it'll decide the game, like how he plays against T. I mean, we know what the Bengals are. Like Chase Brown's questionable. I think I don't know if he plays or not. I don't know if it matters. I don't even know. I don't know if it matters in terms of like the run game. I think Brown does some good stuff in the screen game. I think he's been okay as a pass protector too. I don't see the Bengals like really running the ball overly efficiently against the Steelers team. I know that they haven't been very good defensively lately, but Porter, like how he matches up with Higgins is like the number one thing that I'm watching for in this one for sure.
Well, I was going to ask Alan too. I mean, Alan can give his thought on that, but I wanted to start with Alan when I looked at this Bengals offense versus Steelers defense. Chase Brown had a couple explosive. If he doesn't play in this one, does that maybe take away? I mean, they're a pass heavy offense anyway, but even less of a lack of balance if it is a guy like Khalil Herbert in there.
I mean, Khalil Herbert can run. I don't think it's a big difference, but I will say like it's supposed to be pretty cold and a little windy. So like not necessarily the world's best passing conditions. I think that's a bit of an edge for the Steelers in general, just because the Bengals don't run the ball a ton. And now with Brown banged up, maybe you're looking at doing it more, at least with a secondary running back. But yeah, I mean, I think I mean, I talked about Porter this morning on Morning Rush. That was the whole thing was Porter Higgins. I think that I agree with DB. I think that in many ways is how the game goes. Yeah, but I mean, I think I expect if you're talking about the Steelers defense and the Cincinnati offense, I expect TJ Watt to have a big game. I just feel like he was banged up last week. The Chiefs were getting rid of the ball in like 0.2 of a second. Burrow will hold on to it. He will give you those opportunities to get after him. The Cincinnati offensive line is not very good. I see
Is
TJ
Mims even going to play? I saw him as like DNP late in the week as well, so I didn't know what was going on with him.
Yeah, I think he's. Yeah, I think he might be questionable as well.
Yeah.
I just see TJ Watt taking over a game. We haven't really seen it in a while where he just rises up and obliterates somebody. I kind of see it happening today in this game. I think he's due, and I think this defensive player of the year thing, I know he has been saying the right things, but you can tell it bothers him. And I think he's going to want to put a flourish on the candidacy there. I think he's going to be extremely highly motivated. Not that he isn't normally. He wants to win. I actually asked TJ about doing a story for tomorrow morning about whether or not the Steelers are going to be paying attention to the Ravens game or not. And his only comment was, we just need a bleeping win. that was it. That's all he had to say. So like I know he's focused on the team stuff, but man, I get a feeling he's going to go out and put together a big performance.
Yeah, well, hope so. Definitely need it. Okay, well, I'll start with Alan for this one then before I go to DB. When I look at the Steelers offense versus Bengals defense, obviously we saw how the last matchup went. The Steelers were able to put up points, a lot of points, and the Steelers offense obviously struggling in most games since then, especially over the last 3 weeks. A lot of that obviously turning the football over. There's been times where they've been able to move the ball well. Is the answer to this one simply just not doing that, not shooting yourself in the foot? Once again, just taking what Cincinnati's defense is going to give you, which by the way is a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Look, I think they just gotta. To me, the number one thing is just clean up the mistake, clean up the turnovers. Like if they just don't turn the ball over, they can do kind of whatever they want to this defense. Like it's not good. Like I just think that I have no problem even being like a little bit conservative. Like as long as the defense can like not make it a boat race. But I think like I think there's actually a little bit of fool's gold in this matchup. Like talking about Russell Wilson, like I think this offense could look really good against the Bengals. And everyone's like, yeah, the Steelers are back, and then they score 18 points against the Ravens next week or whatever. Like, the Bengals defense is just so bad that it's like, just don't screw up and you'll be fine.
DB.
Yeah, I mean, the last matchup between these two teams is just hilarious. Like, I went back and watched the game. I watched the offensive side of the ball yesterday. I watched the defensive side of the ball this morning, and like, I have no idea what the Bengals were doing defensively. It's so comical. The big things that I noticed, like with the Bengals on film, their linebackers cannot move. Like we saw that last time around. Like the Steelers are just throwing like checkdowns that would probably normally be like 4 or 5 yard gains. Maybe like those were like getting like 8, 9, 10 yard gains. So, I mean, I think the one thing that rusted in the last matchup that I thought was really great was like you can't go broke taking a profit. And like he kept checking the ball down, getting the ball out of his hands quickly, understanding like they were bailing out into Tampa too. Okay, let me get the ball over the ball and get the ball to the backs, allow them to kind of work. And then he had a couple really nice moments like out of structure in that one as well. So, I mean, he did whatever he wanted this past game. I also think like the Steelers, there was times where they were, like I said, the game plan for Cincy didn't really make sense. They had a bunch of busted assignments, but there was times where the Steelers were getting into 2 tight end looks, so 12 personnel. The Bengals were matching with nickel. I don't know, like the Bengals defensive line's a mess. I have no idea why they thought that was going to work, but the Steelers averaged like 5.5 yards per carry out of 12 personnel in that matchup. So, I mean, really, whatever the Steelers want to do, they should theoretically be able to do. Like, I'm not really getting blinded by the Bengals, like, slight uptick in production on the defensive side of the ball over the past month, just because I don't think they played a lot of real quarterbacks. And if nothing else, I think Russ, like, over the course of the season, like, yeah, when they played good defenses, like, he struggled. But, like, for the most part, like, when they play bad teams or bad defenses, I think, like, that's where he's been at his best. And, like, I think they should be able to cook.
146 receiving yards on 13 receptions for Steelers running backs in that one. They also
is
had
that good?
Yards rushing.
And throw Pat into that too, because he had another monster against them, and has done it consistently.
Yeah, say 4 of his 7 best games in his career in terms of receiving yards are against the Cincinnati Bengals team. So certainly interesting, certainly something to keep your eyes on. Kind of going to play into my bold prediction as well, what these running backs have done. Maybe not the one you're thinking about. Anything else to add about the Steelers offense versus the Bengals defense before we get into those predictions? Nope.
Just don't make us look
like
stupid.
You want to say something.
No, just don't make us look stupid, man. Like if the Steelers go out and they get blitzed, but like if they get blitzkrieged by Joe Burrow and like him being on a hot streak and they lose 35-32, like it is what it is. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it would still suck. But I will be ready to push I try to think of myself as a relatively level-headed person. I hope anyway. I will be ready to push the red panic button if this Steelers offense goes out there and embarrasses me on Saturday night against the Bengals defense.
Fair. Very fair. All right, let's get into some predictions. I got my bold predictions locked and loaded, ready to roll. My one is going to involve the running backs, like I said, and this is going to frustrate me. It's going to frustrate anybody that, for whatever reason, is still playing a fantasy football game in Week 18 potentially, or just Steelers fans in general that see this player get a touch with the other 2 running backs on the sidelines. Cordero Patterson scoring a touchdown in this game. My other bold prediction, and this comes from actually information. I got to give a cap tip to.
Wait. I know that is bold enough, but considering like what we've already seen, when they ran a fade to him, and what was it, a wheel when the one that was actually the touchdown? Yep. I need you to put down the scenario. How Cordero it's a receiving touchdown. The attempt and the actual one have been like so absurd. They're like, just go for it. Give me the whole, like, what is like a double reverse pass? Like, how are you getting the ball to Cordero Patterson?
Nah, it's gonna be like a halfback wheel route. He's in the middle of the field.
Same as last time. Okay.
Maybe a Texas.
Okay.
He's gonna end up in the middle of the field. Yeah.
Okay.
That's what we're rolling with. No Logan Wilson completely changes that linebacker room. So, like DB said, my other one.
I think Davis Gather and Pratt are good players, but they have not had a good year.
I think the roles that they're playing are why. Without Logan Wilson, I think it makes them worse. Like they're asked to do too much.
The trickle.
It's kind of like.
I get that.
Okay. Jay Mars is the reason. Cap tip for this. Christian Kuntz, we talked about him, right? We just brought him up yesterday. how he brought up himself. He made the case against himself making the Pro Bowl, talking about tackles. So he has 2 tackles this year. Don't know how this line was found, but the Christian Kuntz line for total tackles this year was 3. He gets that line. He's getting a tackle. He's getting a tackle tomorrow night to get that number to 3, covering a punt.
I'm just going to be honest with y'all. If you are listening to this podcast and you are betting on Christian Kuntz over under season tackles,
get some help. Just
I don't know.
1-800
I don't know if my guy Jay Mars did or not. I don't know if he bet on this himself.
I'm not accusing Jay Mars of doing that, but if that thought process even crosses any of your all's minds, you need to delete some apps, man.
Yeah, cosign. I almost feel like I should flash the number right now on the screen for people.
Yeah. But, I don't want to be responsible for anybody risking their livelihood over that type of bet.
Well, I will say he's got to be hot because he and I didn't talk very long ago, and he said he didn't have any. So those last 2 got to be like in the last 3 weeks. He's catching fire, at the end of the year.
There we go. So I'm riding the hot streak. There you go. All right. Whichever one of you two wants to go next, if you got your predictions,
I'll jump in because I've got 2 as well. I've got a Joey Porter Jr. interception. And I've got TJ Watt over 1.5 sacks.
All right. Well, DB looks disappointed by the Porter pick. So,
no, I'm not disappointed. I'm mad because this is the first time in literally forever I've had my bold prediction ready before the podcast, and Alan took my bold prediction. And I even have numbers to back mine up on how bold this thing is. So I'm still going to give my numbers. Since he was at Penn State, Joey Porter Jr. has 460 coverage snaps. He has 2 interceptions on those. This season, Porter has 15 penalties. He has 4 pass breakups and 1 touchdown. You guys know how I feel about like coverage data like that. I don't really, I don't take a lot of that into account or, at face value, whatever. My bold prediction was actually that Joey Porter Jr. had more or equal to the amount of interceptions that he does penalties. And I would like to make a public plea that I'm also planning on doing on my preview on my channel. Please wear white gloves. Please. The Bengals are going to be wearing white jerseys. Please wear white gloves. Just it's so easy. You don't have to do it. You can get your swag on. You can pass the aura test some other week. Just this week alone, I need you to wear white gloves. So please wear white gloves.
I think this officiating crew, by the way, is one of the lower ones in terms of pass interference penalties. So you got that going for you.
I love to hear
as well.
That's what I love to hear.
That's big. All right. That it for bold predictions?
Yeah, that's all I got.
Okay. All right. Score predictions. Then I started with bold, so I'm not starting with score. So you guys can hash that one out.
I'll jump in because I took DB's prediction before. Maybe I should let him go in case we have the same score. No, I'll graciously let you steal my score if we have the same one.
Okay. I am picking the Steelers this week. It's been a while since I've picked the Steelers. I've picked them to lose the last 3 weeks, and that's what's happened. So I'm hoping I can help turn things around for us here. I'm going to take the Steelers. I'm going to take them 30-28.
Ooh.
Steelers.
Hey, holding the Bengals under 30, I might be riding a high into the playoffs if they do that.
I think I refuse to believe that this team is going to melt down this bad and lose 4 straight and then have to go into Baltimore in the playoffs. So that's my take. Like I said, I think the Bengals defense is just so bad, man. I really do. And I'm going to be really disappointed if they disappoint me on Saturday.
Alan?
I pretty much agree with most of what DB has to say there. That like I think I like the Steelers in this game. I think that I think the defense is going to play better. I think they're going to make plays. I'm not sure that it's going to look like a dominant performance on the scoreboard. I'm not sure you can keep the Bengals out of the end zone totally, but if you can get the ball to the offense in some good positions, maybe score on defense at all on itself, I think Steelers can win this game and will win this game. And I'm going to go 33-30. And Chris Boswell sets the NFL field goal record with the game winner.
It's insane. I'm 1 point off of you. However, it's with a heavy heart that I say that I'm picking the Cincinnati Bengals
Oh, wow.
to lose this game at Acrisure Stadium to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I got 34-30 as my final score in this one. The Pittsburgh Steelers win. I wonder how many other people I got in the comments. They were already typing up a reply to me saying, "Are you kidding me?"
You should have let it hang a little longer for the comments.
Fake fan.
So you get
part of me feels like as a fan I should pick against the Steelers because the Ravens won. I feel like most people can understand me picking the Steelers with the recent history between those two teams, but I picked them to beat the Chiefs. I felt very confident for whatever reason about that, and it didn't come true. So I'm on a 2-game losing streak with the team now, with that being the case. So I feel like I should pick the Bengals, but I can't. I'm not doing it. Steelers win this one 34-30.
Love it.
Sorry, fan base.
I picked before the season every game, and I've only gotten 2 games wrong so far. And I had them losing to the Falcons, and they won. And I had them losing to the Bengals in Cincinnati, and they won. So maybe I'll end up with just getting the 2 Bengals games flipped, and then I'll be 15-17. That'd be pretty solid.
It's pretty impressive. All right, well, let us know your predictions in the comments, your bold predictions, as well as your score comments before we get out of here. Of course, DB, tell the people that you find you.
Yeah. At Steelers_DB on Twitter and YouTube, and all my written work can be found at SteelersNow.com.
There you go. And Alan?
You can find me on the Smoking Crater and Twitter that is at @Saunders_PGH. Also on Instagram, LinkedIn. LinkedIn. Probably. I don't know. I think I have one, but I've literally never gone there.
I do too.
Blue Sky. That's what I was looking for. And TikTok. And PGH Steelers Now, the site's accounts. Like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications here on the YouTube channel. Keep marching towards our big round number of 15,000. Be cool to get there by the playoffs. I'm just saying.
I think it's got a shot, especially if everybody watching or listening to this tells a friend to tell a friend. So do that for us. As Alan said, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, hit us in the comments. Like I said, if you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from, be sure to leave us a 5-star review and subscribe over there. Just search Steelers Afternoon Drive and you'll find us. Do the same thing on TikTok, and then you'll find me everywhere. Zachary Smith, PGH, for Alan Saunders, Derrick Bell, and myself. Thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.